Morning, Maggie, Gurpreet and Aaron. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Can they hear us? Oh, they can, yeah.
Yeah, morning.
Morning, you two. You need to switch up mic on, Gurpreet.
Morning, everyone. Hi, Maggie. Hi, Deborah.
Hi. We just do the minutes of the meeting, previous meeting, a couple of things before we go on to the story, just to let you know.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Oh, Rebecca. Welcome, Rebecca.
Morning, everybody.
Okay, so I think we'll get started then, if we might. First of all, welcome to Rebecca as our new non-executive director, taking over from Mahmuda, who's retired. So welcome, Rebecca. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
And I know you haven't met most of the people yet, but you'll get a chance in the near future. So I think I've got Tom Lake observing. I don't know if there's anybody else observing, Julie.
Yes, we've got Olu as well, who's observing.
Okay, good. Welcome to you all. Okay, so the no questions from the public, Julie?
No questions and no apologies.
Okay, so the next item really is appointment of Mark Day. Mahmuda was vice chair of the board. It's sort of traditional, the longest serving. Ned takes that on, and of course for her retirement, and I've invited Mark, and he's kindly accepted. So if you're content, we'll accept Mark as the new vice chair. Everyone happy? Well done, Mark. So all your problems now.
Thank you.
Declarations of any other business or of interest to the register? No. Okay. Minutes of the meeting on the 9th of May. Any corrections, please? And then the action log and matters arising 6.2. I think they're either all done or in hand. I'm not aware of anything outstanding. Anyone's got anything? No. Okay. So let's move on to the quality section. Item 6, the patient story, which is individual placement and support employment service. Debbie, can I hand over to you to introduce your team?
Yeah, sure. So Maggie is here as the team lead for the individual placement support employment service, and she's joined by Gurpreet, who is an employment specialist in Bracknell, I think, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, and also Aaron, who is a client of the service. So I'm really looking forward to this one today, to hear the impact that the service has. So I'm going to have Maggie, I think, is going to do a really brief overview of the service and then hand over to Gurpreet and Aaron for the story.
Absolutely, that's the plan. I will just quickly share my slides. Bear with me. Okay, here we go. Thinking about it. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
thanks.
Lovely. So that's who we are. And we've come here today to talk to you about how we all work together. And I have with me Gurpreet, who's our IPS employment specialist, as Debbie was saying, for Bracknell CMHT. Aaron, who's an IPS client of Gurpreet's. And I'm one of the team leads for the individual placement and support service. So what we'll do is I'll run you through my slides, then hand over to Gurpreet and Aaron, and then if you have any questions or thoughts at the end, we can pick those up if that's okay.
Right.
So, as you will probably be aware, unemployment rates for people with severe mental health issues are unacceptably low, and that's been the case for just years and years. It's never shifted. And we know that 70 to 90% of people with any mental health issues would like to work, but only 37% are in paid employment. That's people with common mental health issues. For people with severe mental health issues, it's just 8% of people who are in work. So how does IPS address this problem? There is overwhelming research, multiple randomized controlled trials internationally taken place, approaching 30 now, that comparing individual placement and support to traditional employment support with IPS, clients' time to their first job is 50% faster. The average weeks worked per year are more than double. The pay is higher. We get twice the rate of job outcomes, clients sustain their jobs for longer, and clients have reduced symptoms, reduced relapses, and spend fewer days in hospital. So the amount we invest in each client and the amount we invest in the service really pays dividends in terms of lowering the costs of reducing these inequities. So IPS has 8 key principles. These that we work to across everything that we do. So competitive paid employment is the primary goal. It's not about volunteering. It's not about training and development, building people into work. It's about competitive paid, rewarding employment. Everybody who wants to work is eligible. So that's everybody of working age who is a client of Berkshire Healthcare, whether that's primary care, secondary care, whether it's Impact, it's the eating disorder service, the veterans, everyone is eligible, and we take everyone wherever they are and whatever their symptoms may be. As long as they want to work, we'll work with them. Our job search is based on clients' preferences, so their own dreams, their own aspirations. We're not a cookie cutter service. We really work with people to determine what they would like to do. We undertake a rapid job search as soon as we've determined what clients would like to do. So we keep that momentum going. So as soon as people are expressing interest, we start that. That doesn't mean to say we're going to get people into work straight away, but we start preparing them for that journey. All of our employment specialists, and Gurpreet is one of them, they're integrated into their clinical teams. So they access and update clinical notes, they attend clinical team meetings, and they have clinical supervision in their localities, but they're not clinicians. The support we offer is time unlimited. So that could be 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, beyond. As long as a client wants us, we'll continue to work with them. We provide benefits advice so they can work out whether they're going to be better off in work. And also what's quite distinctive about our service is that we work with employers as well. So we do plenty of employer engagement activities. So that's about finding the right employer for our clients. And that's before and after our clients gain a job. Just a little bit of background about IPS. We're a team of 12 employment support specialists, 2 coordinators, 1 for East, 1 for West, 3 team leads. And again, we work alongside any clients of Berkshire Healthcare who have severe mental health issues and wish to gain, sustain or retain rewarding paid employment. And we've been running in Berkshire since 2015. Each employment specialist holds a caseload of 20 at any one time and is expected to work with about 45 clients over a year. Employment specialists, as I say, are embedded in localities or service clinical teams. We strongly see ourselves as fulfilling the organisation's newly expressed mission to maximise independence and quality of life. Right, I'm going to hand over to Gurpreet and Aaron, and I will stop sharing. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Maggie. So, hi everyone, I'm Gurpreet. So I'm the Bracknell Employment Specialist here in Bracknell CMHT. I actually joined the trust in 2020 in the patient experience team, and then I transferred over to IPS last June. So I've been in this role for just over 1 year, and Aaron was actually one of my first clients that I took over with the caseload. So with IPS support, we offer clients obviously the opportunity to find paid employment, and we also support them to retain them in their job. So there's a wide range of services we offer, from CV building, so we get to know clients like Aaron, find out their interests and hobbies and create a brand new CV for them. Also a brand new email account, specifically for job searching, and an Indeed job search account. And then obviously getting to know clients, we pick certain roles that would benefit them long term. Also the sort of hours they'll prefer to work, because we need to be mindful a lot of clients are on benefits, so we don't want them to lose their entitlements, so we protect them in that sense as well. We also look into disclosure, so that's speaking to employers, letting them know about the client's physical health background, mental health background, and we've found in the past that tends to bridge a lot of gaps. Also makes it a lot easier for clients when they go for interviews, just to feel a bit more at ease. And of course, offer in-work support. Aaron was a fantastic client that came on board and had a lot of dreams and ambitions in terms of working in mental health. which
So yeah, do you want me to carry
yeah,
on?
go.
So
for it.
basically, I am about 6 years ago had a mental breakdown. I'm a suicide survivor. Ended up coming out the other side of that. Ended up getting help through CHMT. Eventually, it was time for me to sort of, get back into work after I hadn't been working for about 5 years. Obviously, met Gurpreet. I had ambitions and dreams, as you said, to use my own experience to help other people. So rather than just go through what I've went through for what seemed like for no reason, yeah, of course it made me stronger and more confident in over the long run because I battled through a lot of stuff. I thought I'd use my own experience to help other people. I've got a really strong passion and desire to do it. I feel like it's my destiny to do that. So I met Gurpreet. Gurpreet, started to help me, search for jobs and stuff. What I'm trying to think how to say it. Basically, Gurpreet was like, and I understand why, but Gurpreet was like, oh, because you haven't been in work for so long, perhaps it's best for you to get into like a retail job, because I haven't been in work for so long. Like maybe in a supermarket for a few hours at 12 hours a week or whatever. And I just said to him, like, no, I kind of said, no, I kind of want to aim higher than that. And obviously I hadn't been in work for such a long time. So obviously my confidence was not, but I just felt like inside myself that I wanted to get a career under my belt. I didn't want to be in what I class. I know that obviously it may help a lot of people, but I class it as sort of a low vibrational job. I wanted to aim higher. So Gurpreet, we both came to an agreement, didn't we, that we would apply for 3 retail jobs, and then every time we apply for 3 retail jobs, we would apply for 1 mental health field sector job.
Yeah.
And how long was it? It was about 2 months, wasn't it? And I kept saying, no, I said all I need is 1 chance to get somewhere, one opportunity, and I'll make it. And I ended up making Gurpreet believe, didn't I? Because you weren't sure at first, and then I ended up getting a phone call, and I went for an interview and got offered a job as a support worker.
You done fantastically well. So yeah. So with Aaron, obviously he had dreams and ambition to work in mental health. So what we did, like he said, for every 2 to 3 retail jobs, we'll do just the same amount in terms of jobs in the mental health field, just to even it out and things like that. And Aaron did fantastically well. He got the interview, and which he aced. He was brilliant. And we also did disclosure. So I contacted his employer beforehand just to brief them on Aaron's background. And the job that they wanted to offer him was over 16 hours at first, wasn't it?
At first, yeah.
So yeah, with disclosure, we obviously said that we prefer Aaron to have a job that's 16 hours, and we gave them the reasons as to why. We didn't want to overwhelm him going back into work with his background, and also we didn't want him to lose his benefits. And his employer was fantastic. They took that all on board. And you've been a success in your job since then, really, haven't you?
Yeah, and I mean, I was explaining to Gurpreet, which is true, is basically if I didn't have the IPS team helping me, I would have eventually got into a role like this, but I wouldn't have felt as comfortable and confident. And the reason I felt comfortable and confident was because obviously it was all about the disclosure stuff. Obviously I've got Gurpreet emailing, management and stuff, and letting them know about my problems and my situation and my past, my mental health. And I found that I felt more comfortable and more confident with him being able to do that, rather than me just going into a job like this and then explaining about my mental health to my manager. I would have felt like I wasn't being listened to as much, if that makes sense. Like, because it's under a professional service, I felt a lot more comfortable.
Sure.
So I definitely see the benefits of this IPS thing 100%. And as I said, it wasn't long until I got into a job either.
What was it?
I kind of shocked myself. Well, you're shocked too as well, didn't I? But it's, I mean, I'm doing 15 hours at the moment. I started on 12 hours. Could raise a little bit up. I think it's just under 16 when you still get your benefits, isn't it? So I'm at 15 at the moment, just so I don't complicate things. Yeah. I'll probably stay that way for a while. I'm going to college in September to do a degree in counselling, to a level 2 and 3 intensive course in counselling, and then a level 4 after that. But as I said, I had to go through stepping stones to get to where I am now. Literally had no confidence. I was fully psychotic, hearing voices, seeing things. I was almost dead. Cutting a long story short, I mean, the story's too long to go through today. But then I ended up having to rebuild my life. Didn't have a choice. I'm glad obviously I'm here now. But no, I can use my experience to help other people. I don't have a textbook or anything, but I have my own experience.
Of course.
I have mild autism as well, so I can relate to people that have even higher levels of autism. I can see all the traits in them and I can help them and stuff. People with psychosis and schizophrenia and stuff, I can relate to the voices thing and all that.
And that's the job that Aaron's doing now. So he's working in mental health and he's supporting, like you just mentioned, other people with mental health. So
Yeah,
and you enjoy it, don't you? So
Yeah. I mean, at the moment, I really enjoy the job I'm doing. Actually, it's very, very varied. But I basically have clients. Like obviously, Capri has me as a client, and I do what they want. What they want to do for the day. So could be that one of them they want to. Maybe my client wants to go for the cinema for the day. So I mean, obviously, I get a free cinema trip. They pay me to go cinema. It can be, yeah, I know it sounds great. But it is more challenging than that, obviously. Some of them have quite challenging behaviours. Some have really high levels of autism. And then they have freakouts and stuff, and we have to be there to calm them and stuff. So it can be more challenging. And then I can have days where it's really peaceful when I'm at the cinema watching. It's very, very varied, you know, very varied. And at the moment, I probably have about 8 clients, and I've been meeting new clients recently as time's gone on. I've just passed my 6-month probation about a month ago.
Fantastic.
So, I mean, I'm there now permanently
Yes.
for the foreseeable. Once I go to college, do that. I eventually want to become a counsellor. But yeah, I'm happy to continue doing what I'm doing now. And as I said, Capri helped me quite a lot with it. So yeah, it's definitely a good service and recommend it.
Sounds fantastic. A lovely story, and lovely to hear you're happy in what you're doing, and the advice you need to get, because it's quite complicated with benefits and things, and being able to explain your own condition and what you can and can't do. So I'm delighted for you, and I'm delighted for the service. I think perhaps we could take some questions. Could be Maggie? Would that be all right?
Lovely, that's fine. Yeah.
Sure.
Aileen.
Yeah, first of all, oh, sorry, that's my dog just barking in the background. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your story, Aaron. It is so interesting to have listened to that. It's amazing, and it's obviously made such a massive difference to you. So obviously thanks to Capri as well, and the rest of Maggie's team. The one question I had was, you said the first of your 8 key principles is to look for competitive paid employment. I just wondered if there is any areas that you actually support people perhaps doing something that is voluntary to get them the experience that they can then more easily move into paid work, or whether or not you really do solely focus on
Yeah,
employment.
we get asked this a lot, and it's something that we have conversations with clients about and their clinicians about all the time. I mean, the IPS model is very much paid work, but because there's just the evidence is there that kind of using volunteering as a sort of pathway into work can be a very long journey, and actually if you're dedicating your time, your days to doing volunteering, equally you could be getting the same kind of rewards as well as getting some financial rewards at the same time. So we won't turn people away, but we will signpost them. But that's the service. It's very clear. It's about finding people competitive paid employment. Just because, and this is why NHS England has got such a focus on this and the long-term plan, the statistics are so very shocking for people with severe mental illness in terms of work chances, and the employment market. So that's why IPS has been created and is being supported and funded to deliver competitive paid employment.
Excellent. It sounds like it's doing a very good job. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Aileen. Sally.
I'll echo Eileen's comments to you, Capri, and Aaron, but my questions are directed to Maggie. I was really impressed, Maggie, with the principles of integrating your team into the clinical team. I think that's unusual, and also the fact that you give unlimited support. But I wondered if you've got any statistics around how long people stay in employment, you know, how long they've been able to maintain the employment, and how many people you get into employment each year, because it's the maintenance sometimes which is the real challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right, and that's one of the things that we're measured on, actually, which is, and we have some targets around KPIs. So I think it's what we should be doing is getting people enabling our clients to sustain paid employment for 13 weeks. So 45% of the clients that we get into work should be sustaining it for 13 weeks. And then it's about 30% of clients should be sustaining it for 26 weeks and over. And those are targets that we meet and we measure ourselves against. Unfortunately, we've got an issue with our data warehouse at the moment. We've got a fantastic dashboard, Tableau dashboard, which gives us all the statistics you could possibly want around how many clients we work with and how many we get into employment. But I can say that last year we worked with several hundred clients, and around half of those we were able to get into paid employment. So that was
that's fantastic. So we meet the sort of national targets, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sally. Julian.
Two things, especially fantastic, inspiring presentation. Thank you, Maggie. The other thing is, I'm right in thinking that there's been often employment schemes around for many years, but they haven't been so effective for people with particularly severe mental illness. I'm right in thinking, isn't there? There's quite an evidence base that you have to follow, which differentiates you from other employment schemes. Is that right?
There is, absolutely. So as I was saying earlier on, the IPS has been up and running. It was set up in the United States initially in the 90s. So it's been up and running for, I can't do the calculations, what's about 30 years? So over the time, and it's been rolled out internationally as well. So over the time, there's been plenty of studies comparing IPS to other types of support. And we also know, I mean, this is more, there was this, I won't be able to give you a definite statistic, but the Health and Work Programme, which was run by the Department for Work and Pensions, which was a scheme kind of aimed at people who've been long-term unemployed, including people with severe mental health issues. Really, I think it was getting about 25% of clients, something like that, into work. So, and again, compared to IPS, it wasn't a goer. And there are lots of schemes that are, you know, again, DWP is developing new initiatives. They're doing one for primary care, but again, that's for common mental health issues. So we're really, really clear that we're at severe, enduring, complex mental health issues, and IPS has been proven to work for that cohort. Yeah.
Very good, Rebecca.
Thanks. Like the others have said, it's a really inspiring story, and thank you for sharing that. And I was really interested to hear that you're starting a degree in September, and I wondered whether the scheme supports people with getting additional qualifications as well as getting them into work. Was that part of the help that Gurpreet's given you?
Oh, you mean the college, going into college? No, that is something external that I've done off my own back. But as I said, becoming a support worker anyway, through the help of IPS, that's helped me to build my confidence to now then look into even further into the future. So the support work things helped me massively build my confidence, and then obviously the next step is me. I want to go to college, so I did that off my own back.
Yeah, thank you.
I think there's some examples. It's certainly something that we can offer if people have got those ambitions to move into further education as well, kind of alongside employment, as Aaron has done. So it's part of the we work to quite strict 25 points fidelity scale that we're measured against, and one of those is around supporting people around training, further training, although we don't support training into work, but once they're in work, you know, how they can possibly develop. I mean, one of the things that we had quite an interesting conversation about, didn't we, Gurpreet and Aaron, last week, is the increasing number of roles within mental health which are focused around people's lived experience, and that the trust is looking at workforce development around that, and which is a really welcome area of work. So I think that would be something potentially that Aaron and many of our other clients actually would be interested in getting involved in the future.
Okay, Tamina, then we better move on, I think.
Yeah.
So it's just related to your last point, Maggie. So yes, first of all, thank you very much. That was really inspiring. It's given me a big smile on my face for the rest of the day, I think. Where we're really encouraging people with lived experience to come and work within our organisation, is there what do we need to do to make that a supportive environment for people to come into, in terms of, I don't know, supervision, mentorship, etc.? Is there anything we need to put in place to kind of around individuals when they're coming in to work in some of these roles?
That's really interesting, and Jane might want to speak to that as well, because under the patient experience team, Liz Chapman and Zena Pike are doing a piece of work around the lived experience workforce development, and part of that will be looking at specific roles and also kind of how people are mentored, supported, supervised, and so on, and the potential, you know, hopefully the kind of development pathway as well through the roles, so that lived experience is not, it's, you know, we kind of, those of us who have lived experience, sometimes within NHS organisations, we think, oh, we're not qualified, so we're going to hit a kind of glass ceiling, but actually we're qualified we're experts by experience, and we know that the trust really values that. And so it's just now, there's some serious conversations going on about how we take that work forward for all of us who currently work at the trust and those potential employees as well. So yeah, it's happening.
Okay. Well, look, this is a most inspiring presentation. Aaron, good luck to you, and thanks for coming on the call, and Gurpreet and Maggie for your excellent work. So please keep it up, and as Tamina says, it's put a smile on our faces, I think, for today. So thank you very much indeed. No, it's a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.
Bye bye.
Take care.
Yeah. Bye.
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 Okay, well, that's a lovely patient story. Thanks, Debbie, for that. Now we move on to Freedom to Speak Up. Mike Crosati is here. Mike, over to you.
Morning, Martin. Morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to Rebecca. I was just wondering if might be useful for Rebecca's point of view if I give a brief overview of what Freedom to Speak Up is and its origin. So, following the concerns raised within Mid-Staff's NHS Foundation Trust back in 2015, there was an inquiry led by Sir Robert Francis QC, and a whole range of recommendations came out after that, one of which was that there should be an independent, or as independent as possible, Freedom to Speak Up guardian within each NHS provider trust, and that to set up a national guardian's office, so a national body that oversees Freedom to Speak Up. And it's essentially an independent route for members of staff, volunteers, students, etc., to raise any concerns that they see within the organisation. It's primarily around patient safety issues, but most of it nowadays is around what I would call the staff experience. So things around processes, bullying and harassment, poor behaviours within teams. There are now over 1,000 guardians nationally, not just in provider organisations, but within ICBs, primary care, and private healthcare. And one of the requirements set out in the recommendations and the guide to boards is that the guardian presents a 6-monthly report to the board on activity, data, learning, etc. So hence why I'm here today.
Mike, I think you could take the report as sort of read. I think if there are some
Sure.
things that you want to pick out, and I'm particularly keen just to go to your last bits about the recommendations where you want support from the board. Is that all right? And by the way,
Sure, of course.
I think having the examples you put at the beginning is very helpful. So, so if you could concentrate perhaps on the recommendations you want the board to do, and then we can have some questions. Is that all right?
Yeah, of course. Let me just get to the end. So basically, I'm asking the board to support all initiatives around the staff experience, trying to address concerns such as bullying and harassment, those that are subject to microaggressions or any form of racial abuse, looking at detriment. So that has been a big issue that the NGO are looking at regionally, but also within the organisation. So any negative outcome from raising a concern, really trying to remove that. And I suppose the most important thing is trying to improve the listening up culture within the organisation. So encouraging staff to speak about their concerns because they feel confident that those concerns will be addressed in a sympathetic and compassionate just culture way, no blame culture. And looking at barriers, so the Freedom Speak Up month this October is around removing barriers, so looking at barriers that might exist that inhibit people from speaking up, fear of detriment, inaction, that sort of thing. So I'm asking the board to support those initiatives, please.
Thanks, Mike. We'll just take some questions and then we can come back. I'm sure we do support them all, but who are we going to go first? Aileen.
Hi, Mike. Thank you for your report. And like Martin said, I thought those examples you put at the front were really enlightening. And again, as Martin said, I'm sure as a board we will absolutely support your recommendations. But I wondered, as a non-exec, is there anything specifically you would be looking for us as non-execs to do to help you and support you with those recommendations? And if there's nothing that comes off the top of your head, you can always kind of get back to us.
No, certainly. So when you're visiting services, to be mindful of the culture within the team that you might be visiting, just asking around questions around, do people feel enabled to talk about their experiences or what they witness? So in your Gemba visits, that sort of thing, I think would be most useful.
Okay, yeah, and I mean, as an individual, that's what I do when I go, and I'm sure my colleagues do. But yeah, if there's anything else, that would be great.
I think it's demonstrating that the board and execs do listen and are aware that mistakes can be made, and the only way we can correct them is if people talk about them. So whatever we can do to encourage people to speak about their experiences, really, and reassurance that it is safe to do so, trying to minimize any fear of detriment, as we call it.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Aileen. Mark.
Thanks. I believe Tamina was actually before me, Martin. If you want to go first, Tamina.
You go ahead, Mark. It's fine.
Okay. A few points from me. First of all, those case studies, when I met with Mike last week to talk through this report, really brought it to life. And I'm just making a request that we can keep this as a part of your regular reporting to us, because I likened it to, in the past, I felt that we were getting, it's almost like the football results. We were seeing the result or we were looking at the league table. But these case studies, for me, really give us a match report of what is happening on the ground. And I think it's that realism that brings it alive for us. And as a board, Mike, I think you've done really well in terms of doing that. Second point I just wanted to make, and particularly having Jane here this morning, I think is useful, in as much as the international nurses section that you included is concerning in terms of the high proportion in terms of issues being raised by those. And as this is a key part of our recruitment strategy for the future, I really do think that it's something that you and Jane need to put your heads together and come back and say how we can better address that, because it's an extremely high proportion that should be giving us cause for concern. The final point from me was just, I was so encouraged by the refreshing of the Champions Network, that you've drawn in so many, rather like we just heard from Aaron earlier, people who have experienced and lived experience that are now part of your champions. And I think that, again, the reality of being able to use that experience as ambassadors for Freedom to Speak Up is really powerful. And it might be useful just to hear some of those experiences in a future report in terms of how they're being able to turn that to the positive. Otherwise, thanks a lot, Mike.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Tamina.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. I suppose one of the things I just want to assure the board is, certainly when I go out and about, I think you're very visible, and the support that you provide is really highly regarded. And there's a lot of credibility around that. So I just wanted to just make that observation. A couple of things for me, and I suppose it's about it's about how we get the balance right. And I guess in my head maybe it's a bit about just culture. But if someone raises a concern with you, they're themselves and then other people who are involved in that, particularly if they might be implicated in the behaviour or the action that's been of concern. So I suppose my query is, how do we make sure we wrap around support with everyone, recognising that some people might be encouraged to review their behaviour and develop more insights. And I've started a bit of an email conversation with Debbie, I think, about what do we need to do with our managers so that they can be both compassionate but also find an appropriate way of holding people to account that isn't experienced as being bullying or harassment where that might be the case. So it was just it's kind of the other side of it, how we balance the support we give to individuals through Freedom to Speak Up, but moving towards how we encourage people to focus on their behaviours, develop insight, but still be able to do their job, which is help our staff to do their jobs.
Okay, thank you for that. Sally.
Well, first, Mike, let me say I'm always impressed by how comprehensive your reports are. I mean, amazingly comprehensive. I wanted to pick up the point that Mark did around the international nurses. And I don't think the report, and forgive me if I've overlooked it, talks about any particular themes, but I did wonder, later on we're going to talk about a new national strategy around EDI, and I did wonder whether there was practice there that we could draw on. The second point I just wanted to raise, Mike, is that it appears that there's 4 patient safety incidents, or not incidents, 4 patient safety concerns. And I wondered if they came from a particular area or they had a particular theme.
Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember. So no, you've got me on the spot there.
Don't worry.
I think generally it might be from our mental health inpatient services.
Right.
Do you want me to help you out, Mike?
Yeah, go ahead. The font of knowledge.
Those 4 are actually from quite different areas, and there weren't any particular themes, Sally. They were all any patient safety concerns that are raised are all investigated so that we can see whether they are found and what actions we need to take as a result.
Right, thank you very much.
And in general, I get very few patient safety incidents. Most of them go via other routes.
Yeah, yes, and I think that reflects the sort of national trend, but I just wondered if there was a theme or an area. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much. Naomi.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. This, I think, is a bit of a build on where Tamina was headed. you know, I think I have a reasonable appreciation of how nuanced some of these cases can be and the complexities that arise. You know, I don't think we should ever think of this as simple. And actually, Mike, I was really struck by the examples, which were incredibly helpful as discussed. But particularly that out of the 4 examples, 3 of them, B, C and D, eventuated in the individuals involved moving job. That seemed to be the solution. And I'm probably oversimplifying, but it's purposeful in terms of asking my question. I guess I'm looking for a bit of reassurance that whilst that might be the solution or a solution to kind of solve the problem, are you confident that we're actually getting to the root of the problem? It can't always be the case that the solution is, well, somebody moves jobs and we're not actually tackling the root cause.
Yeah, I think moving job is not certainly the desired outcome. Why should somebody be penalised for having a negative behaviour against them and raising that as a concern? There are small occasions when that is done for as short a time as possible. So somebody might be seconded out of a service while an investigation is taking place, but it is certainly not the desired outcome. But those, they were looking for career progression. So they eventually got it. So they all stayed within Berkshire Healthcare. They got the desired outcome. It wasn't in a manner that they perhaps would have wanted. They would, I'm sure, would have liked to stay within the service they were in, but ultimately they all had positive outcomes. But I agree that there's a time period between somebody raising a concern and the conclusion of an investigation, where if it is 2 people within the same service that still have to work together, how we support and support both parties while that investigation is going on. And I suppose that is something for perhaps Jane and myself and other HR colleagues to have a look at around the processes and timescales around investigations. But that can contribute to some of the detriment. Quite difficult to be line managed by somebody who you have said might be bullying you.
Yeah. Thank you. It's very clear to me that you get it. Thank you. Helpful.
Jane, have you got a quick point to make?
Only just to say that actually moving people sometimes is the right answer, because that's what the individual has sometimes requested. So it has to be one of the options within the within this that we want to pursue. But I'm with Mike that it shouldn't be that the person that has suffered should be seen to be the person that always moves. But occasionally we do get people who actually ask, I would like to move and this is the best option for me.
Okay, Rebecca.
Thanks, Mike, for the report and also for explaining at the beginning. Appreciate that. I was just wondering, because it takes a lot of courage to speak up. And once the investigation is concluded, is there then sort of a check-in, say, I don't know, 12 months later, particularly if somebody has moved roles, just to see what the effects are, not in the immediate, but subsequently?
So there isn't, Rebecca, and I know that some trusts do that. So they look at the expected career progression of an individual, and has that been affected by them speaking out at some stage. I think that's quite difficult to quantify. Once we have closed a case, from my point of view, I get feedback from the individual in the short term, how they felt about the service and potentially the outcome, etc. But there isn't really any check further down the line.
Happy, Rebecca?
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's scope to or scope to build that in, perhaps, because I think maybe we don't necessarily see the longer lasting effects, and whether there's things that are being missed, and whether that person would repeat the action of speaking up. That to me would be the most important test in 12-24 months time. If you ask them, would you speak up again? If they say yes, then I think it's working. But actually, if not, then we might be missing a trick if we're not finding out that they're actually almost gone underground because they've moved, and we think that we've resolved it in the short term, but maybe not longer term.
So that generally, in the short term, once people have raised a concern, they say that they are would be happy to come to the Guardian again or raise a concern in another way. But that's in the short term. So I think probably there is something that we could look at there for the medium to longer term, how it impacts on an individual psychologically or whatever.
I think, Mike, it might be useful just to reflect on that, some of Rebecca's points.
Yeah.
I just got one quick. In your report, I don't think it has a sort of a table of whether the client, as it were, is satisfied with the outcome, not whether they're satisfied with the talking to you, whatever it is, but have they had their problem actually resolved? Don't worry about going into detail now, but I think in your report you've got lots of the number of cases and things, but there's nothing which sort of says what percentage of these is actually resolved satisfactorily to the point of view of the person who raised the issue. So maybe just like to think whether we can present that a little more clearly next time. But look,
I agree. Something about managing expectations as well. So people's expectations of an outcome might be different from what can be done. But point taken.
Look, this is a really important topic. The board has always been 100% behind the Speak Up and supporting you and what you do. So there's no real issue at all about this. And I know we all support your recommendations that you put forward. I think it's interesting, like all these things, just to reflect on some of the discussion we've had about how we might even make it even better or more productive. So I'm sure you'll do that, Mike. And so thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much.
And perhaps we can move on to Debbie on the Speak Up self-assessment and the Guardian strategy.
Yeah, I'm happy to take both of these together, really, Martin, because they are follows on. So both these documents were seen at the board in committee in May, and they are therefore here today in public for transparency. They have all been commented on by board members and wider staff, and our networks have specifically commented on them as well. So they are really here today for noting, so that they are in public, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Right, Sally?
My only comment, Debbie, relates to what I said about the international nurses and whether then, I looked at the equality or diversity section of the strategy, but I wondered, in the light of those numbers in Mike's report, whether we should put something in specifically around international nurses. That was my only comment, or whether you felt it might be covered in the diversity section.
I think it's probably covered. I think the international nurses, it's actually a really complicated picture. Most of the staff that are seeking support from Mike are not necessarily seeking it. It's not necessarily the work context that's causing the anxiety, it's the support networks around it. And I've talked to quite a lot of the international nurses, and Julian has been out and seen some of the wards with international nurses on as well. And sometimes it's about the support network they've got outside of the ward that is then impacting on them, as opposed to their experience around their line manager. And there's also something around our international nurses, and the NHS is a very different beast from where a lot of these international nurses have worked before. And it's quite complicated to get used to it. and you know, many of our services, you know, don't exist in the same way in, you know, community nursing as an example. So if you've come from an ITU and you in wherever you were working before and you come over here and you're suddenly in the community, that, you know, so that it's a lot of it is around that sort of complexity and support.
Right.
So
Well,
to build that into the freedom to speak up
Yeah,
strategy
yeah.
as an explicit something for
yes,
it is probably more difficult than, or it's not as straightforward to just write a sentence that captures it
No,
all.
no,
Is
no,
what I mean.
no. It's far more complex.
Yeah.
Far more complex. Thank you.
Tamina.
Yes, thank you very much, Debbie. I've really helpfully made a note, and I can't remember which of the 3 documents it refers to, but I think it goes to a general, a general thing, which is we have some really rich sources of data coming through. For example, people who've raised concerns with Mike, themes coming through the staff survey. I think feedback from some of our Gemba visits, and then maybe something around the discipline of doing that. And I suppose it's how we as a board can really sort of triangulate that, so we're really confident we're getting a good feel and using different sources of data to identify where there might be issues. We've got stuff that comes through the quality concerns register as well, for example. So I suppose it's just making sure that we're really triangulating and using all of that really broad sense of information and kind of examples that really help us focus on where we might need to be focusing some attention.
Yeah, I think the triangulation and bringing together different sources is always important, isn't it? And you know, I always worry, I'm sure non-execs do, of the bits we don't know, if you know what I mean, those bits of the organisation that somehow we don't get visibility of and maybe get left out. Debbie, as you said, we've discussed this in committee, so I think perhaps we can take that. The only thing, minor thing I want is it says to note the strategy. I think in the public we should approve the strategy. Make it clear,
sure,
make
sorry.
it clear. That's all right, to make it clear that we've given our full approval. If people are content, we need to approve the strategy. Okay. Thank you very much, then, Debbie, for that. I can get my screen up. Annual complaints report then. Again, this is a fairly standard report, isn't it, Debbie? Perhaps you can highlight any things you particularly want us to focus on.
Yeah, so it's a statutory report that we bring every year to the board, which focuses purely on the complaints element of the patient experience. So the quarterly reports that you see throughout the year here that hopefully triangulates a little bit in a more rounded way all of the patient feedback that we receive, whereas this is statutory, we need to just report on the complaints annually. So there is nothing in here that you haven't seen throughout the year. There is no significant changes that I wanted to draw people's attention to, although we had slightly more formal complaints. When you look at it in relation to contacts that we received, actually it was slightly lower per contact last year. So nothing significant to draw out that I would want to say today, really. I'm happy to take any questions, but say there should be no surprises in this. It's what you see throughout the year.
Okay. Any questions? Sally?
Debbie, is this national, the way you have to present it? But you know, there's a big focus at the moment on sexual assault in the NHS. What we've got the category where sexual assault, alleged abuse, bullying, physical assault, they're all in the same category, aren't they? And it's a bit difficult to sort of separate out the numbers there. Is that how we're required to present the stats?
Yeah, they are categories that are, but we do, of course, have the more explicit sexual safety report that comes to the QAC, so it comes to the Quality Assurance Committee, and of course that is much more rounded because this is only formal complaints.
Yes.
Whereas the sexual safety report that comes to the Quality Assurance Committee is actually any concerns that are raised in relation to sexual safety. So yes, that is a category, Sally. But I wouldn't be looking to this to give assurance around sexual
No.
safety as per se. I would be looking to the more detailed quality assurance committee paper.
Yes, you couldn't really look at those that differentiation in this. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? It's a minor presentation thing, but I'm just wondering sometime whether you've got tables of the complaints by various services, so children, young people and family, for example, and the upheld, not upheld bit of the complaints is in a separate table at the end, and so you can't sort of see whether the particular services that are, you know, having more complaints upheld or not. But perhaps you can just have a look, just think about that, whether it might just be easier for us to read the paper. If that's, is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thanks so much. Now we move on to Minu, please, the medical appraisal and revalidation annual board report, which as usual makes positive reading.
Thank you, Martin. The board report is presented in the standard format that NHS England prescribes for us, and if approved at the board and signed by the chair, I then submit it to the regional revalidation office, which collates all such reports from all designated bodies or trusts. As we know, although this also applies to private locum agencies and anyone who employs a doctor who is licensed to practice. In Berkshire Healthcare in 22-23,
Lost 2 minutes. Oh. So we have a.
Sorry, I briefly dropped off. There are a number of trusts where they have a proportion of doctors who do not engage with annual appraisals for revalidation, don't have that problem at all. In fact, our 5 delayed appraisals are 4 of them are due to various absences and 1 due to workload, where it was delayed by a little over a month. So don't have any concern about this process. It works fine. We've introduced an electronic system which makes it somewhat more efficient, though in the early months and even a year or so there is additional work for medical staffing to pick up to get all our doctors on the system, get all the information loaded up. But I think we are almost there. So I'm happy to take any questions or any assurance that colleagues on the board might require for this.
Any questions, comments for a minute? No. Okay, it looks very, very professional, Minu, and is everyone happy? I can sign the letter of compliance at the end. Okay, thank you very much. Quality Assurance Committee, Sally.
First of all, I'll say said something about the minutes. You can see from those minutes that we discussed in the context of the quality concerns paper, the recent Never, well, not so recent now, but the Never event at Prospect Park Hospital, and in particular looked at the oversight and governance around that, and the ongoing review of the contract. We also noted in those minutes, you'll see that we've been added to the near miss corporate risk register, the lack of awareness around recognising a near miss and escalating, particularly out of hours. But other than that, I'm very happy to take questions in relation to the minutes.
Any questions for the minutes? Looked a comprehensive meeting to me, Sally.
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay, do you want to move on then?
Learning from deaths, colleagues will be able to see there the numbers in terms of 126 met the criteria, 61 were closed with no further action, 65 required second stage review, and of the 65, 10 were classified as serious, requiring classification. And during Q4, the Trust Mortality Review Group reviewed the findings of 32 second stage reviews, but importantly, concluded that there were no cause of concern. But happy to take questions on the Learning from Deaths quarterly report.
Any questions?
And then the Guardian's Safe Working Hours quarterly report. Well, during the reporting period, which was the 1st of Feb to the 30th of April, there were 4 hours of rest exception report. But other than that, there was nothing to report in terms of safe working hours. And again, very happy to take questions.
Any questions? Okay, very good. Sally, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Minnie, as well. In which case, could we move on to the executive report? And we take this, any questions as usual for Julian? Yeah, I just Julian, could you just remind me, is it in your executive report a bit, I'm just trying to find it, about the investment in new nursing staff, long-term workforce plan? That's it. Yeah, I found it now.
Yeah.
The question that, which is not really that anyone here I suspect can answer, but the thing that I worry about this is that it's great to see the investment and the commitment to the workforce, but the numbers of new nurses that are being expected to be recruited looks very high compared to reality. And I know I'm not the only person that's raised this, and I don't think there's anything we can do about it, but I just have this worry that some career paths, you can see how they can increase numbers reasonably well, but the increase in size looks so big, I do worry about it. Jane?
Yeah, I think you're right to be worried in some ways, Martin, because there are some real questions being raised, certainly amongst my clinical educators, around our ability to absorb that many students into the workplace currently. However, the reality of whether we will get to those numbers is also going to be interesting, because again, we've had clearing places announced last week, and I went in and had a look at all of the university courses locally for nursing and AHP roles, for nursing and AHP degrees, and every single one of them is in clearing. And the University of West London, where we take most of our nurses from, are only 50% full. So even if you increase the number of places, doesn't necessarily mean we're going to find the number of applicants wanting to take those places. Just to reassure people, well, not reassure, but just to give some context, what we are going to be doing is taking away the workforce plan now. And I'm working with Bob to do a workforce model that says, look, if this is what the anticipated ambition is, what does that mean in terms of numbers, and what does that actually mean in costs? Because I don't think some of this plan is going to be fully affordable within current budgets, particularly some of the plans around increasing the expansion of apprenticeships, for example. So we're going to go away and have a look at this at Bob level, and obviously we will translate that into local level as well and see what that would mean and what that would look like.
Okay, and just before I invite Sally, could I just, one other point, that the language about the way this is presented, which was about reducing international nursing recruitment and replacing with domestic, whilst I understand the need to have a more vigorous recruitment of nurses trained in this country, there is a slight danger that we send a message to our international nurses that somehow we don't want them. And regardless of how successful, we want and value our international nurses now and for a long time in the future. So I think there's a slight, the wording was unfortunate, I think, in the way it's presented. But
yeah, particularly, Martin, because there was an admission at the webinar for CPOs, that we will still have some international recruitment of nurses and medics, and we should still want and embrace those candidates that are coming in to support us, because they've got skills that we still want, and we would still welcome into the NHS.
Thanks, Jane. Sammy.
I too wondered how the clinical areas would absorb these increases, and then when I looked at the sort of recommendations around the nurse training, I could see that they're talking now about virtual hybrid learning faculty and increasing the amount of training hours for nurses in terms of simulation, which I thought was quite interesting. But to build on Martin's point, even if we got these numbers, my understanding, Jane, is that we would still need the levels of international nurses and agency nurses that we had sort of just prior to COVID. It sort of just gets us back to that. It wouldn't even make, wouldn't mean that you wouldn't need agency or you wouldn't need international nurses. We will still need them.
Yeah, and I think there was again in the CPO webinar, there was a question around the big focus, obviously, and the question was around the big focus that's come out in the press around whether this level of investment, which is welcomed, by the way, and people are welcoming the investment in training places, but whether the numbers that were being quoted would bring us back up towards the OECD averages, because as you know, we are bottom of the OECD for head of for medics versus the population per head of population, and third worst for nurses. Nobody would commit that this would actually take us back into line, because of the fact that, well, we'll have population growth as well, because we've still got a growing population, unlike some OECD countries. We've also got staff who are leaving the NHS shortly after training and going to work elsewhere. So they weren't saying it would move the dial in terms of our number of medics and number of nurses per head of population. No. However, we can only welcome that for the first time the government has recognised that we do probably need to train some more people. And I think there was also a recognition that we have become, maybe the language wasn't right, but we have become over-reliant on taking staff that have been trained in other countries who had anticipated that those individuals would stay and work in their own countries. So, yeah.
Yeah, and those countries often need them.
Yeah, and they do need them. Yeah, they do need them and they want them. There are some countries, we know that the Philippines, that is an economic model for the Philippines. They overtrain, or they have done in the past, but that isn't the case in all countries.
Okay, thank you. Julian.
Yeah, so what does it mean for us? So I think people are broadly welcomed the first time of sort of fully funded, costed, recognised kind of workforce shortages and what we might do around it. If we take medics, we know that those medical school places will be taken up, and we know that if they do them in those areas that haven't got medical schools, it will be good. But we also know there'll be a massive lag in saying those things. But we've got to start somewhere. So really pleased about that. But it's still in the short to medium term means that we've got some work to do. And I'm pleased, that we've got retention as a focus in this organisation. That will be pivotal, and you can't really sort of, command and control that from the centre. That's work that we've got to do as an organisation. There's some good things that the centre might do, the pension reforms, and obviously resolving some of the issues around pay and strikes. That's something the centre can do, but there's a lot that's in our gift that we can shift. The other bit is this is a training plan in order to deliver a workforce plan. So the other bit that we need to think about is in our part of the world, how we strategically engage with the non-clinical workforce, who is so important to us, analysts, support workers, that type of thing, really, which are not covered by this plan. So again, that's an area of focus we need to be mindful of. And then there's three pieces that come together, again, that are treated as axiomatic in this paper. One is that we'll see increasing use of kind of digital in order to drive up productivity. The estates will change, and we'll see a shift in the locus of care from acute settings to less acute settings. And so we need to work with our ICBs to be able to do that. At the moment, the spend profile has not shifted in terms of acute care into sort of the community. And if this plan is to be realised, we need to see those three things happen. And then we've got our productivity challenge. It's based and predicated on sort of 2 to 3% year-on-year compound productivity increase, of which the things I've just highlighted, better use of estates, digital, and different delivery models will be absolutely central to that. So I think there's quite a bit for us that we can get on with as well. And there's real clarity that they're not going to be resolved by the centre.
Very wise words. Aileen.
I was just going to comment on the last item in Julian's report about staff sickness. I mean, we've talked about staff sickness in the past. It isn't new news, but when you see it so starkly in these 3 short paragraphs here, it really highlights what an issue sickness is for us. Because obviously, even if we get all the staff and then 5.6% of them are off sick, that doesn't help us in any way. I just wondered if there's anything more to be said about how we're addressing that within the trust.
Julian, are you able to comment?
Yeah. I mean, well, the first thing is we've got a lower level than that, so that's quite a helpful benchmark to see. So we're obviously doing some things right, and generally those organisations providing mental health services have a higher level of sickness. So there is some encouragement that the work Jane and others have put in place is assisting in terms of the kind of the support package. But Jane, do you want to come in with some specifics around that?
First of all, I would just like to say that sickness is, we have got some data around how much our sickness costs us, which I can share if anybody wants to have a look. But I wanted you to just be aware that this is a big area of focus for the Frimley ICB this in their new plan, and we're going to be looking at this at a system level as well, because we think that there are some things that we can do perhaps better at a system level, particularly around health inequalities that may affect our own workforce, and more around the preventative piece. At the moment, we tend to react a lot to sickness rather than actually looking at how we can prevent that sickness happening in the first place. So, as I say, at Frimley level, I'm going to be leading on that work. So I'm hoping that we will get some really ambitious and interesting thinking about how we can tackle that a bit better.
And are they looking at our support packages that we already provide? Because they've had very good feedback, haven't they? And so is that what sort of thing that Frimley are thinking of adopting elsewhere?
So what's happening with our support packages? I mean, most NHS trusts have good occupational health support. Our Wellbeing Matters service, the funding, as you may be aware, was withdrawn nationally, but Berkshire Healthcare agreed to continue to fund that for our own staff, which I think is really positive, because we've got some real evidence that is seen as really beneficial to our staff, and it does get people back into work or keep people in work. So we will continue with that wellbeing piece. There is a wider discussion within the ICBs about is there any way that they continue to offer a wellbeing service, but we couldn't get to an answer around that fast enough for us, so we've decided to at least secure our own wellbeing support. But it isn't just about the mental health support, although 25% of our or roughly 25% of our sickness absence is related to stress, anxiety and mental health issues. But we do have 75% of our sickness absence is related to other matters, including sort of physical health needs. So we recognise that a couple of our biggest issues, we have staff who are on waiting lists, and as waiting lists have expanded in the NHS, that has become an increasing pressure, that we've got people who are out of work for long periods or have bouts of sickness, or because they are waiting for things like a IPAS referrals and things like this. So that, that's something we need to have a look at, is that, how fast our staff are able to access care and get them back into work. But as I say, the big focus is on not waiting until somebody has a problem. Let's try and anticipate when we've got some problems and see what we can do more in the preventative space, and also sort of tackling some of the health inequalities that we may be seeing and that are reflected within our own workforce as well.
Okay, thanks so much. If you may, we'll move on then to disability pay gap.
Oh, thank you. I've forgotten I've actually got a paper to talk about here.
Oh, yeah.
So the disability pay gap paper. This is the first time we've done a disability pay gap paper. We're not required to do a disability pay gap paper, but as we were, we've done a gender pay gap paper, and we had done again a similar piece of work looking at the sort of race disparities. It decided that we ought to look at our disability pay gap as well. So again, I will say the same as I have done on other pay gap papers. This is not the same as unequal pay. It looks at the difference between the average pay for disabled and non-disabled colleagues. I'm not going to repeat the paper, that you can see the paper, but the important thing is that our disability stats show that we've got roughly the same proportion of disabled colleagues as we would expect to see in the population, although that sometimes varies by grades. And we can't say with absolute accuracy because we have a high level of non-disclosure in this area. But the information that we got from the people have declared is that disabled colleagues actually seem to earn slightly more on average than on non-disabled colleagues. It's only small, but it does tend to show that we don't have a pay gap which shows that there's some disadvantage in being disabled in this organisation, which is at least some good news. As I say, we do have a large number of people who are unstated. We've had a good discussion about that yesterday in the diversity steering group. We know that there's a large number which are medics, which we believe are because a number of the student doctors on rotation don't bother to declare, and there is some questions about how can we encourage more people to declare without people feeling under pressure that they must declare, and so we will continue to do that. The good news is though that our declaration rates have held up and in some cases improved over the years, so we are moving in the right direction on that. I'll leave it there and open it up if there are any other questions.
Jane, thank you. I think it's, the board was very keen that we looked at the not just the one or two. We want to look at a range of pay gap things, so we understood the full dynamics, and this is very helpful and, as you say, generally reassuring. Any questions at all on this? Okay, Jane, thank you very much indeed. So can we then move on? I think, Paul, I think it's now over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. So finance report for month 2, so to the end of May. I think overall the general assessment will be that we've made a good and solid start to this financial year. At this stage, there's nothing hugely concerning in the numbers that we've seen through to the end of May. So year to date, we've got a deficit of 100,000, which is 400,000 better than we planned for this point in the year. Slightly behind on our income, but not concerning. It's just a number of smaller balances with some tidying up around ICB allocations. Worth noting, we still haven't yet agreed fully with Frimley ICS all of our investment allocations for this year. The process is proving challenging, to say the least. Timelines have slipped in terms of when we're meant to get final agreement. It was meant to be May, June. It's probably now looking like at some point over the summer before we get final agreement, certainly on children's and community investments. In terms of pay, we're 700,000 underspent year to date, and that's really what's driving the better than planned performance. I hope you'll note from the charts on page 207, contrary to previous years and through the much better planning process we've been through this year in terms of aligning the workforce plan and the financial plan, the plans and the actuals are much closer together this year. We've seen minimal substantive workforce growth over the first couple of months, but we are using a higher level of temporary staffing. That temporary staffing mix has shifted slightly, so agency spend is down 7% on the same period last year. And in terms of performance against NHSE's agency ceiling, we're at about 2.8% of total pay bill. The agency ceiling is 3.7, so operating well within that. The figures as presented don't include either the bonus 22-23 pay award settlement or the final settlement for 23-24. Those payments go through the payroll at the end of June and will be reported next month. I think probably worth early flag that because of the issue around funding formula and the way it's skewed, we do expect that there will be a pressure from the pay award, and we're flagging it through the usual routes through the ICS. We've spoken directly to the senior team at NHSE around this. I know previously Julian's raised this with NHS providers, so pick up on that once the payments have gone through and report through into next month's report. Pay, we're on plan. Out of area placement numbers were lower than expected through the first 2 months, although numbers have increased over the past few weeks, so I expect that we'll see an increase in those costs next month. Capital, minimal spend, broadly on plan. Probably a key thing to note around capital is just delay in terms of finalising the deed of variation around the place of safety, which means that that project will slip and will now straddle the end of this financial year and into next year. We originally assumed it would be completed in this financial year. And final point just to note is around cash. We're below plan on cash, and that's because we haven't yet got the correct, if you like, monthly standing order values from the ICBs following agreement on the 23-24 contract values. So we expect that will rectify and we'll catch up over the next month. So happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Paul? Sally?
I don't think this is an issue for you, Paul, but it's around the place of safety scheme. I went to visit the place of safeties at Prospect Park a couple of weeks ago, and I wondered if delaying that till next year, whether there were any safety issues, because they're not ideal, are they, by any stretch of the imagination?
No, you're correct, and we do know that we've, like I say, got an outstanding CQC action to do something around that. We've, like I say, we were initially delayed because the new site we've moved a new service into, but like I said, we've had unplanned issues in terms of getting the paperwork finalised. So at the moment, until we've got agreement from the SPV in terms of getting the deed of variation through, our hands are tied in terms of developing the new facility.
Yeah, I wondered, I could see Minna in the background, whether there were any sort of specific safety issues that we had to mitigate given the delay.
Minna, could you comment?
Absolutely. So I've just acquired the role of executive lead for this project, and we had a first inaugural meeting, and of course the delays, as Paul explains, somewhat out of our hands. It's the whole complexity of PFI, deed of variation, etc., which is holding it up. Sally, to your question, I don't think there are immediate safety issues. There certainly are capacity issues, dignity issues, CQC being satisfied that this is something they've asked for a good number of years ago for it to be rectified, and we are now on this journey or the path for almost certain there's a clear plan, but it is delayed far more than what we would like. So I don't think there's an immediate patient safety issue unless it arises from a whole chain of events because of capacity. And I think we try to manage that day to day for that reason. It's not the structure itself is not resulting in any safety problems to our patients.
Right, thank you.
Thanks so much. Anything else to Paul? No, I guess the big issue, Paul, is, which you probably can't answer, is what are the big risks in the later in the year? So just smile, just smile and look. It's crucial.
I guess what I can say, Martin, is I think based on what we're saying through the first 2 months, we've probably got a pretty good handle in terms of where our financials are going to sit. I think the pressures on system finances is a different matter.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much, Paul. We move on to the performance report.
Yeah, thank you. So if I just pull through some of the key metrics just to highlight. So in terms of drivers, self-harm below plan, and the team are doing some work to understand the drivers behind the trend over the past 6 or 7 months before they make any adjustments to the target, which they may do in the coming months. We've got a new driver on there, which is clinically ready for discharge in mental health wards, excluding our out-of-area placements. And this is a driver that's born out of the work that Teresa and the team have been doing at PPH over the past year on flow and bed optimization. So they've set an ambitious target of 250 bed days per month, which we're currently in excess of, but obviously is a key driver if we're going to do something around floor and ultimately the capacity that we're using in terms of beds at PPH. Restrictive interventions will be a new one, which we just need to agree the definitions on, but we expect to start being able to commence reporting on that in the coming quarter. Turnover is below plan, still currently at 19.4. And I think looking at the detail behind that, all divisions, I think with the exception of mental health, are now below that 16% target, which is encouraging. If we move into the tracker metrics on page 228, health visiting new birth rates remains stubbornly below target and is worsening. There's challenges within the Reading team specifically, and we've agreed a stretch target of 21 days with the local authority at the moment due to staffing issues, to try and, like I said, appease them in terms of what we can deliver within the confines of the contract and with the capacity we've currently got available. Page 230, which is efficient use of resources, is probably the area showing most reds in terms of metrics and indicators. So we've got acute and non-acute occupancy well above target levels. And we've also got medically fit for discharge patients in terms of mental health and community, again, ahead of where the target levels should be, giving an indication just of pressure that we've currently got and continue to have on services. Finally, just in terms of regulatory compliance, page 231, our weights for audiology, which obviously we had issues with during the middle part of last year. Their aim was to get back to 95% target by the end of June. They're currently at 83.4. I think they're just shy of the 95% target on the last figures I saw to the end of June, but I've got enough confidence in place that now they've got the new staff on board, they should be back to the 95% target by July. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Paul? Just pleasing to see the sickness rate is 4.07 for May, I think is the sense, as Julian indicated earlier. Okay, yeah, I think that, Paul, there are a couple of that new measure, not now, but could you just put the definition of the measure about ready for discharge, just so it's a new one? I think we just need to understand it. Would that be all right? Just to
yeah, that's no problem.
Include it in a post-meeting note or something. Okay, all right. Thank you very much. So where are we now? People strategy, quality, diversity, inclusion strategy update. Alex, important paper.
Yeah, so I think Jane's going to take us through this one. I'm going to introduce the anti-racist strategy update.
Thank you very much. Jane?
Yeah, okay. So as you know, we've got a 3-year people and ED&I strategy, and what this is looking at the people aspects of the ED&I strategy. There is also a part of the ED&I strategy that looks at patients, but this piece covers the people aspects of that ED&I strategy. Both the people and ED&I strategy are due to be renewed next year and refreshed next year, and we will renew and refresh those based on some of the information that's coming out of the new NHS workforce plan. But this is an update on where we have, where we are on some of these things. I'm hoping that it's relatively self-explanatory. Our principal measure that we use as a proxy for a number of other issues is the turnover rate, and as you know, we've done a lot of work to try and manage the turnover rate down from a high of around 17% last year, and we have managed to get that down. So it is beginning to drop. We will continue to monitor it, and we continue to implement some of the things that came out of our rapid improvement event to look at how we could address turnover within the organisation. Otherwise, what I've tried to do is give a little bit of a summary of where we're up to with some of our key work, and also just to give you a bit of a sense of what's been happening in the directorate, because we have had some particular pressures within the directorate. So yeah, just to give you a flavour of what's happening. Any questions?
Jane, you said this is about basically about staff, but it does refer to community engagement a bit in this, and
it does. But what I wanted to say is that it's not specifically addressing the work. It's more focused. This piece that you've seen is focused on the workforce aspects rather than the patient aspects of the ED&I strategy. So the ED&I strategy is like a Venn diagram. It overlaps with our people strategy. So the people elements of that fall under our people strategy, but we do have a separate strand on the ED&I work which focuses particularly on patients, and we should never forget that. But we like to talk about that. If you want me to come back and talk specifically about that, we will prepare a different paper for you.
We've got a session on health inequalities in the September board agenda, so it might be something we can just wrap up in that.
Yeah.
We had a very good discussion that those who weren't there, the diversity network meeting yesterday, I think it was, if I remember right.
Yes, it was.
And just to say that I'm quite impressed with the approach that Ash, the new head, is taking towards this. I think it's very positive and straightforward. So, and of course, this has been produced, a strategy produced in conjunction with our staff networks, isn't it? So it's
Thank you. So yes, that's the work that he has been doing on the anti-racism strategy, which I think Alex is going to be presenting later. But yeah, we have now got Ash in place, and he has been leading the work around ED&I, so the equality, diversity and inclusion, and also on the leadership piece as well. And we've also got Carla in place, who has been leading specifically on the ED&I strategy and implementation. I've been really pleased with the work that they have done there, and really pleased with the pace that we've got behind some of the anti-racism work, particularly. And again, without sort of encroaching on that conversation later, we're getting really positive feedback. Just to note that the Frimley ICB, who have been leading some of the discussions around anti-racism in the system, have said that they want to use this as an exemplar for the work that we have been doing. So I thank you to the board, because I do know that the board have engaged in that work, and that has really been noted and has been seen within the ICB context as well.
Thank you. Question, Sally.
Jane, the reference to the Band 5 nurses and ensuring that they're ready for Band 6. When I talk to senior nurses or in the trust, I get the impression we lose an awful lot of Band 5s because they go elsewhere for Band 6 posts, and they get them early on. And from what would the senior nurses tell me, and I wondered whether this would sort of help mitigate that in some ways, that we're sort of taking a more dynamic approach, so we can pick them up early and ensure they've got those skills, and perhaps identify roles across the trust that they could move into?
Yeah, that absolutely, Sally. That we targeted grade 5s because we knew that from the rapid improvement event that grade 5 nursing and that grade 5 role is one of our big areas of concern. We have our biggest number of vacancies are actually grade 6 nurses, and we've got 5 grade 5 nurses, and we're asking them to go for interviews to be move into grade 6 roles. When people were saying to us, we're not getting enough support to progress within the organisation. So this work around what we're calling competency-based progression, it isn't just based on competencies. We will also be looking at behaviours and looking to see that people have been given the right preparation. But the idea is that we will develop a set of competencies and behaviours that would indicate that somebody would be ready to move into a grade 6 role. And that would enable us to understand fairly quickly if we've got a pool of people and candidates available, that we could, we can go to that pool first before having to put adverts out. That will save time for our staff. It also means our own staff get an opportunity to get promoted first. If they're not suitable or there's nobody suitable, then obviously we can go externally into the wider marketplace. But that was a piece of work that came directly out of that listening in the event that we ran, the rapid improvement event, I should say, where we listened and said, right, what can we do? And there is an appetite. We're just going through that work at the moment. We've worked through that with our clinical colleagues, and there is certainly an appetite to expand on that from the recent discussion we had at SPG. I know the psychology team are very interested to look at that work, and then we'll also discuss how we could perhaps extend that into mental health. We're doing some similar things at the moment, just in a slightly different way.
Right, thank you.
Any other questions for Jane? Okay, Jane, thanks so much. Perhaps we can move on to anti-racism and invite Alex.
Thanks, Martin. So we are building on the work we did as a board in seminar from February, which was about building our understanding of anti-racism and how it could help with some of the issues we have in Berkshire Healthcare for our staff and our patients, particularly around discrimination, some of the systemic issues around progression for our BME staff particularly. You can see in the paper some of our key problems which are writ large in the Workforce Race Equality Standard. We are on a journey as an organisation, and for a long period we have been concerned about the different experiences that our staff groups face working here, and some of our patients and communities as well. We are just starting our journey around our anti-racist commitment. Other organisations are doing this with some success, but I think the key thing we said as a board back in February is this needs to be meaningful, and it needs to
You're frozen, Alex.
Equality network with community leaders, with our board, with our wider staff, has been to focus on that action statement, that we can communicate and engage around that action commitment, and that the strategy and action flows from that to the places it needs to flow, and that every single member of this organisation understands what it is to be anti-racist, and that is to step into a space of explicitly addressing racism. On page 246, I think there's a very clear view of what racism is at individual, institutional, systemic and internalised. I think it's helpful to have that understanding. Through our engagement workshops, it's clear not everyone's at the same level of understanding the impacts daily on staff and patients and the public of racial discrimination, or that they feel it affects them in the way it affects other people. So that's why I'm saying we're at the start of a journey. And what I'd like the board to do today is just obviously feedback around this initial outline of a strategy approach to kind of the corporate commitment to anti-racism, and in particular review that action statement, which we're still taking feedback on. I had a good discussion on that yesterday at the Diversity Steering Group. Executive had a few more comments around that. Would welcome board comments around the action statement and the current position we're on. But my sense is we've been struggling to make traction on the res data in terms of those problem statements in the paper. That anti-racism must be our next best efforts around really making an impact and taking action for people. But the point here is it's not about an EDI team, it's not about individuals, it's about a collective commitment as an organisation, and it starts at the board, which is why it's here today. Thank you.
Alex,
And we have Carla who has joined us. Carla, welcome. You may have just caught the end of what I was saying. Is there anything you'd like to add in terms of this public board meeting context? Your perspectives about where we've got to and where we're heading with this work. Would value that.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, I did just catch the back end of this. Yeah, I think this is really some of our initial thinking around this, and we do appreciate that there's more that we need to do to really hone in on some of the actions that are going to underpin that action statement. But I think the action statement was really born obviously out of original board conversations, and now it's really just trying to put that marker out there to demonstrate to our communities, both our internal and our external communities, where our kind of baseline is and how we hope to work with people in future to hold ourselves accountable in this space, but very open to any kind of suggestions around how you think this work should proceed, any specific things that you think. I think our community engagement is really where we need to kind of step up to the mark a little bit more in this space. And of course, a lot of these problem statements are very detailed. There's plenty of publications, there's plenty of reports, there's plenty of national and local insights in this space. So we're not looking to kind of wrap ourselves up in a million pieces of research. What we're looking to do is start to take action, impactful action in our local community spaces where we can actually have a strong influence over improving some of the outcomes, the experience and access that our communities experience and hold us accountable for. But very happy and open to answer any kind of questions that people might have.
I wonder whether we could just look at page 256, which is the page that has got the action statement. I think that's right, Alex, isn't it? And just any views or comments on that statement, because this has come out of the staff networks and the board discussions. That's right, isn't it, Carla? So,
yeah.
and the intention is this or whatever form it finally takes will be the statement we will commit to and use to guide us.
Absolutely.
So I think it's worthwhile spending, not saying now, but any comments now and then thinking about it to make sure it's, it's exactly what it is that's going to make an impact. So because we've had many years of well-intentioned work, but hasn't really, as Alex said, got the traction that we had hoped. And I think something which really makes it turn into action, find out why those things and what are those few things that really will make a difference, whether it's for our staff or our communities, and then focus on those is valuable. So a little bit of time there for you to read the statement. Any comments about the statement? Do you think it's meaningful enough? Do you think it's clear enough? Do you think it will guide us on what we want to do? Okay.
I would just say it's a significant step forward for us to agree a statement so explicitly around these impacts. So in of itself, it is going to take the organisation forward, with good communication and engagement supporting the action. So I'm really pleased to see the outcome of this draft. Sorry, Rebecca.
Rebecca, go ahead.
Hi, Alex. Nice to meet you. Yeah, I think this is brilliant. It's obviously something I'm really passionate about. Earlier on, it talks about there's a quite nice, clear explanation of the difference between not being racist and being anti-racist. And I think, we as a board understand that. But in terms of the statement, I wondered whether there might be some way of weaving that in. So when other people are reading this statement and commitment, it's sort of highlighting to them the difference as well. Because I think it almost takes it for granted when we talk about Berkshire Healthcare commit to anti-racist practices, etc., and actively opposing racism. But yeah, maybe just making that a bit more explicit.
Okay.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Sally.
Alex, I mean, I think it's a big step forward. I wondered at some point whether there would be the intention to bring together this with the health inequality strategy and bring them together, because they're sort of the same side of different sides of the coin, aren't they?
They are, and you know, Carla's just referenced access, outcomes, and so on, and we have work ongoing to scope our health inequalities element of the strategy. Mark Hinchliffe from our QI team, we want to take a corporate programme approach around health inequalities, both that affect our communities but also our staff. And Mark, this is going to be about data, about how we prioritise
Yes.
and where we go first. There's already a very interesting cut of data about where we perhaps should focus our intentions around health inequalities, and it directly links to this work. And it should
Yes.
do
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
And the governance around it brought together, presumably.
Yeah, so Julian, I'll come to you just a second, if I may, but just to say that Alex and I had a little discussion. It seems to me that the board, thinking now widely, both health inequalities for our patients, so a wide definition of this, needs to have an assurance mechanism. So we answer the question, how is the board assured that everybody that we serve has equity of access to our services, has equity to the type of treatment, and has equity of outcome? And I think it's sort of something which we all sort of probably have in our mind, you know, intuitively, but actually I think we could need something on the board that we can keep being reminded. So whether it's about our staff, whether it's about our communities, where's the evidence we're getting to help us be assured that those things are happening? So that's what I'm suggesting that in September, when we take the health inequalities work and perhaps wrap it up with some of this, we might consider as a board having it on at the BAF as a statement assurance issue that we need to be assured of. Julian, sorry, Rebecca, was it the same issue, or was it?
I was going to raise a different point, but Julian had his hand up before.
Let Julian go then, and then Julian.
There's a bit of a delay getting off mute there. A couple of things. Obviously, we've had a good opportunity to contribute to this. I wouldn't want to wordsmith it too much. I think it's pretty clear where it's at. I'm sort of with Rebecca in the sense that obviously it starts with the board, and a lot of this language we're familiar with. One of the things I've said to Carla on the few interactions I've had is that we've got to keep our language simple, clean, and clear. Our previous iterations around addressing discrimination in the organisation have often been quite academic. And if we want to create a movement in the organisation, I appreciate it starts from the board. If we want to create a movement, say I want to get change in the organisation on any issue, you know, simple, clear, meaningful language is really important. And where we are using language that people don't necessarily understand, it's really important that we clarify that, because you know people are not going to get behind this. You know, I know I've quoted this many times, but think during the pandemic how many times Debbie had to repeat the message about face masks, which was a relatively simple message. This is much more sort of complicated. So plain, simple language backed up with demonstrable action is the way to go. And I think I've seen a change in the kind of team in terms of kind of picking that up. And I think that we've just got to check in and make sure that actually, you know, the ward administrator, you know, the porter, you know, the ward manager, everybody can understand what message it is, what their contribution is, and what the accountability is around this. And sometimes that is, I think, has been lacking. So I'm pleased that it's a bit clearer, but I'm with Rebecca. We should check in and not make some assumptions about language and concepts.
Thanks, Julian. Rebecca.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to raise two other points, really. One, in terms of the section in green where it says how we'll achieve this. Again, the wider context of what I read was it was about education. I think, Alex, you've mentioned that this morning, that some people are further in their understanding of these issues, and you know, some people have lived experiences and some people don't. So we talk about supporting colleagues, but I think what's really key is the education piece. So in terms of how we're going to achieve this, there needs to be sort of a lot around educating people. And then again, the other thing that when I was reading the wider context is that top-down leadership to shift culture. And that is really, I think, the nub of it from my perspective. So again, in terms of how we will achieve this, I think it's that, you know, and the fact that we're discussing it at board level, it's that top-down leadership to ultimately shift culture that should see the result.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. So what I'm taking is that we're supportive of this. There might be a bit of minor, taking on board the comments, Carla, we just had, but I think there's a strong support for this general direction. And just to echo Julian's comments about sort of simplicity, I think we do need to keep this simple. It's very easy to get very academic about this. So keep the message really simple and then make sure it's converted into action, because where we have taken firm action on some of these things, it has been well received by the staff affected. But anyway, it's not for me to get involved in the detail. But so I think the board is very committed. Alex, thank you very much. It's a really important topic for us, and we look forward to playing our full part in future. Thank you very much, Alex. Anything else we need from us?
Thank you to Carla and Ash. You may have missed the thanks from Jane, Carla, at the beginning. Thank you.
Yes, it's very good. Thank you very much. Okay, digital strategy, Alex.
So Mark is here with us. Are you there, Mark? We've got our usual update on the digital strategy, and in the in-committee piece, you'll see our strategy outcomes have a really important digital outcome measure around productivity and hours saved. So our time to care, releasing time to care through digital initiatives, very much at the heart of this strategy, alongside other initiatives. But I'll hand over to Mark just to take us through the latest update. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Alex. Hi to the non-exec directors that I've not met before, Sally and Rebecca. I'm Mark Davison. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the Trust. Working to Alex and responsible for all things digital across the organisation. This is a quarterly review, just recapping on our 2021 strategy and what we said we were going to do, where we are against that programme of work. Broadly, it's all okay. I think I'll take the report as read and take any questions or any points you want to discuss.
Any questions? I always look to Aileen for this, but
interestingly, I haven't got any specific questions on it today.
Well, there we are.
Nailed it.
Mark, can I just start whilst people are thinking for a really difficult question? Are the move to doing more digital, as we talked about earlier, perhaps you missed it, about making our nurses and other clinical people more efficient because we provide them with more streamlined digital support or whatever sort it is. Do you feel that general direction of travel of productivity is going well, or do you feel that we're sort of behind the curve? Or because there's a lot of activity going on, which is great. I'm just trying to think this general thing. Early on we said I'm persuaded that there's going to be thousands of more nurses, or at least enough new nurses and other clinical staff, and therefore we have to help ones we do have to be as efficient as possible. And digital is seen as a major way through that. So are you sort of in that frame of thinking, well, we're sort of on track, or is it do you need more guidance or more direction, or I'm sure you want more money, but
I think we're broadly there, Martin. I think
okay.
So I'm minded when that topic came up, and just thinking back to 2019 when we were looking at our innovation processes and how we might formulate that digital strategy for 2021. And there was a quote, I think, from Deloitte at the time that said no country in the world is recruiting or training enough medics to fulfill its population health requirements for the next 20 years. So on that basis, we have to deliver different services. There's a point I think I'll pick up again in the next paper around digital maturity and where some of those gaps are, which are beyond what we're currently thinking, and perhaps, well, not perhaps, there's an opportunity there for a discussion as a board as to which ones we think are most important, which ones we think we should be pursuing. I think for us as an organisation, when you think about it, we've been involved in some of the leading edge things for quite some years now. So shared care records has returned something like 500 whole-time equivalents of productivity back to the NHS, just preventing us from having to keep phoning up GPs and ask what the patient's medication is or what their current medical status is. So those kinds of initiatives have really started to deliver productivity savings. What we're into now with things like virtual wards and home remote monitoring, I think it's early doors for everybody, but we're starting to see a lower skill level required to do some of the beginning part of the pathway and some of the end part of the pathway. I think the middle piece is still that specialist piece. So I think we're affecting in those two areas. And yeah, definitely BHFT is in amongst the best with all of this.
I'm pleased to hear it, Mark. Sally.
But with more money, we can always go faster.
Yeah, I know. Sally.
Mark, perhaps I should know the answer to this, but if you're taking forward particular clinical initiatives, and I think, say, for example, electronic prescribing, how do you manage the interface between, you know, the technical guys, as it were, and women and the clinical? Do you have particular clinical leads who have a focus on technology? Is that how you do it in terms of the translation?
It's a combination, Sally. So in my team, about half of my digital transformation team are ex-clinicians trained to be digital, right, and the other half are digital trained to understand process.
Right.
And then on top of that, depending upon the specialist services, I steal as many of Tamina's staff as I can get my hands on.
Right.
and that's from, so EPMA is a great example. The SRO for that is our chief pharmacist. So it's clinically led. Right. It doesn't mean he does all the work. It means I get to go there and do whatever he tells me to.
Yeah. No, that's helpful, but it's with these clinical projects that you need their sort of translators sometimes, and I wasn't 100% sure how you manage that.
Yeah, and I suppose we have a tradition. Classically, the gentleman that heads up our intelligent automation program at the moment is an ex-paramedic. He used to work for Royal Berkshire Ambulance Services. It was his claim to fame being he's the only person in digital that's delivered 8 babies.
Okay, Tamina.
So Sally, you must have read my mind, but I was just going to stretch it a bit further, and I suppose I was thinking particularly around virtual wards, which, you know, could explode really in terms of the scale and scope of what might be developed in that space. And I suppose for me, Mark, it's partly the interface with our clinical colleagues, but also how we reconcile our strategic ambitions, progress we might want to make in terms of some of the services we deliver digitally, I guess the efficiency that might give us, but also how we balance that with our risk appetite and safety. So I know, again, sort of Debbie and Minu and I are starting to ensure we have conversations which sit around the virtual ward space, so that we're recognising and looking at it from a number of different lenses. And I guess it's an offer really about how we can make sure that happens routinely as we start to be developing some of these new ways of working.
Yeah, definitely. I think I think how we deliver that transformation piece and how we think about what type of service with what type of receipt. So how does the patient feel about that service and how they're receiving it is of paramount importance and drives what we do in that digital space. Because, as you know, we can always invent another application that some poor clinician has to type into instead of seeing patients. I'm not sure that's the right way to go, but I'm pretty sure it's not. And it's about how we make sure those tools support what that delivery is. And so far, I think we've done a pretty good job of making sure that's the case. I think when we push the boundaries too much, we get constrained by the marketplace. And a number of times there just aren't products available that can do what we want them to be able to do. And the cost of from scratch product development these days is so cost prohibitive. Absolutely. That we really struggle, and we often end up in a hybrid, wait for the market to catch up, then plug some of the gaps with better digital tools in that kind of second generation piece as well. And that sort of alludes to that risk appetite. We could put more money in and really go for it and try to develop those bleeding edge products. But we need to think about, we're a health service delivery organisation, not a software developer.
Thank you, Mark. I'm very pleased to hear you say that. Look, there's some great work going on. I just on page 281, just a warning flag came up to me, which is about ICS digital plans. It talks about Frimley and Bob. Is there a danger that some of the good work that you and your colleagues are doing in getting integration and commonality of processes could be harmed by us being in two ICSs that are different? I think the Royal Berks is an example of using a different system, or potentially using a different system. And is there some way we can get a bit more coherence in our wider geographical patch so that we're all on one sort of system that all I know it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but is it likely to get fragmented as a result of this?
I think there's always that possibility. I think even within an ICS, Martin, not so much. I nearly said not so much in Frimley, but that's not true. In every ICS, the health and social care sectors, and sort of as we're growing into things like voluntary care sectors, it's really easy to just go back to silo working. When you're trying to meet a board level objective, and I think one of the things we miss, if I gave you a kitchen example, just because it's come up in some of our conversations, when you look at discharges from the RBH to West Berkshire Community Hospital, and it's not a digital process, it's a manual process. That makes no sense, but it's never going to be a point of urgency or priority for the RBH because the number of patients is so small compared to what else they're delivering, and when they're dealing with A&E waits and everything else. So it's about how we work with our partners to create opportunities for them to do the right thing.
Okay.
That's a slightly a mental health biased way of putting it, but that's what we're really trying to do. And so far, we've managed to persuade Bob ICS to go down the same shared care record path. We've got a joint analytics approach for population health and for research data through the secure data environment, not only across Frimley and Bob, but also into Surrey as well, and broadening it to that Thames Valley. So it's really becoming regional. And what we're trying to say all the time, I think most of the digital leaders, there's a right size for most things. Never mind about whether it should be regional, whether it should be local, but there is a right size for most things to get it to work effectively. And we're starting to get that hit. And again, I suppose for us in Bob, in community and mental health, our electronic patient record solutions are on a convergent track.
Okay.
In Frimley, a bit more difficult because there's only one provider in Frimley, and the only other provider is in Surrey and Borders.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, look, I mean, it seems to me you're obviously very sensitive to this issue, and which is reassuring because that's a complex issue. And I do agree that in life there's a sort of a blob that's the right size for some of these things, and it's different depending on the circumstances you're in. Rebecca.
Hi, Mark. It's nice to meet you. I just had a question about the procurement. So particularly for the software development, when you're building from scratch, you talked about the cost of that. Is that always procured from the UK, or do you use other international software developers? Because I know Lithuania and other areas, it's much cheaper to procure software development.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, it's usually through a UK partner. So that's generally how we'll do it. Only because it's such small scale what we get written bespoke for us, that it's hard to sort of be an expert in navigating that position. But as a classic example, probably 2/3 of the development for the primary care system EMIS is done in India. It's a good example of how that works. The Lithuanian and Estonian stuff is quite prevalent within the community sector because they have a lot of community care out there. So that works quite well from that perspective as well. And that's often done through national frameworks. So again, the sort of procurement is scaled nationally, and then we can take advantage of those framework contracts.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much then, Mark. Anything else you want to raise?
Not on that item, no.
Okay. Just trying to think where we are now. I've got to get my agenda up.
We've got the digital maturity
Oh yes,
assessment
thank
paper
you.
from
Yes,
Mark. Yeah.
thank you. If you could do that, then Mark.
Okay, so what I wanted to do really was focus everybody on the last slide in that. But before I do that, let's just say, well done BHFT. In terms of a national digital maturity assessment, we've managed to demonstrate that we're one of the best in class in the country. We're in the same cohort as people like Oxford University Hospitals, UCL, Alder Hey, and organisations like that. So I think we're doing fantastically well in terms of our digital maturity, and it gives us a benchmark as to what areas we might want to look at. It's not the be all and end all, and the bar will change each year. So and I suppose Julian will be upset with me if I don't say also the leading mental health trust in the country in terms of digital maturity, including beating CNWL. Quite right too. So I think I wanted to focus really on that last slide of discussion points, and you'll see from that there isn't really an area where we say, well, we really need to do this. There's lots of improvements to go on. Some of them are in our current plans, and some of them really we're looking, I suppose I'm looking from a digital perspective to leadership from the organisation more broadly to say, yes, actually, this is an area we're going to get into. We are going to pursue a kind of more health and wellness service rather than an illness service, which is a very short paraphrase. So I don't know how you want to handle that conversation. I guess you've all had a chance to read the paper. I see Aileen would like to come in as well.
Aileen, do you want to?
Mine was just a comment on your summary at the very front, which I didn't really quite understand, because
Okay.
you're just when you're talking about at the end of the summary, you'll say there's some opportunities to increase our maturity. I'm trying to find it. I can't find it now. But there was you made a comment about there's some that require significant organisational change to achieve. And then one you list is empowering our patients. Now, we've got empowering our patients on our digital strategy, haven't we? So I was just wondering what you meant behind we need to make significant improvements.
Okay, so the opportunities outside of our current plans, if we think about empowering our patients, so patient self-triage and self-referral. So we have current plans to get patients engaged in their care through things like Silver Cloud. We have current plans, so that's online therapy services for those people who don't know that. But when it comes to self-triage, we'll do some pieces in areas like MSK. That's probably a good example. And in IAP, we already have self-referral. But they're kind of traditional things that we've already done. What about everything else? We have over 160 odd services in our organisation. Is self-triage something we're really going to pursue? Is it something that, for instance, let's change tack a little bit. Patient access to their records, you have to be more careful about how you do that in mental health services than you perhaps do in hospital services. So
sorry, carry on.
Sorry, so that kind of self-referral and triage, would it go beyond IAPT or not? Would be a kind of open question.
So are you saying then that this is an area within our strategy we're looking at expanding further, as opposed to purely our maturity?
I guess I was trying to intimate that we shouldn't go chasing a digital maturity assessment score. That comes back to we're a mental health we're a health delivery organisation. But from a strategy as a business, do we think patient triage and patient self-referral is something we should be pursuing?
Okay.
Because if we do, we'll do something in the digital space to support it, and that will increase our scores. But if we don't, then we won't, and we won't increase our scores. But that doesn't matter. It's okay to not increase.
Okay.
Mark.
Yeah, but we do want to work in this area, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Aileen. Mark, I think in terms of your issues you were asking us to make a decision, I think this is something that the executive needs to take away and put in the context of the wider strategy of the trust, and then come back to the board with a proposal as to you know, what it wants to do for our challenge and reassurance, rather than us commenting directly. I mean, some colleagues may wish to comment some things, but I don't think we can comment at this juncture on this paper.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
In that context,
it was exactly that process, Martin, to say, yeah, how do we take that conversation forward rather than what's the answer today? And I think so. In conclusion, then from me, I'd say the digital maturity scores are good now. We already have plans in place to improve them, and for those areas which are new areas for us to get into, it's really form follows function, so it needs to be included within that strategic development piece before we include it within our digital plans.
Okay, so I'll come back. Right, Mark, thanks so much indeed.
Thank you.
If we can then move on, audit committee meeting. I think Raji's not on the call, so I don't know whether anyone can comment on it. No, we've got the minutes. If people want to make any comments on the minutes, please do so. Otherwise, we can follow it up next time. Councillor Governors update. Just to say, really, as you know, we've got lots of new governors, partly because of the elections, which changed the colour of lots of councils. And we have on the 19th an in-person day to update all the new governors and indeed old governors and indeed one or two non-executive colleagues about the process of governance in the trust. So I think that's a very positive thing, and thank you for Julie and her colleagues for arranging that. The external well-led report and action plan, Julie.
Yeah, for the benefit of Rebecca, just to say that NHS England's Code of Governance recommends that it's good practice to have an external review of our governance every 3 to 5 years. And we had our external well-led review in January. And that this is just, I've attached a copy of their report in which they made 5 recommendations and recommendations and observations. And this is just to report that I've done an action plan with how we're going to take those forward. That's all I want to say on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments? Happy? When are we going to do a quarterly? Come back to us every quarter just to make sure we're doing it.
We could do quarterly or 6 monthly. I mean, I want to say that the recommendation, that the areas that they identified for improvement, I mean, they're pretty modest in scope.
They are. But I mean, it's a very positive report. But,
it is, yeah.
So these are sort of improvements on the side. Let's do it in 6 months, and we'll keep track every 6 months to make sure we either want to continue them or we want to drop them. Okay. Thank you very much for that. We are now trust seal. Paul?
Yeah, just take it as read. This is us taking the lease out on property in Wokingham. We're moving out with the old forge, which was a large and not incredibly well utilised building. So we're following what we're trying to do with the estate, where we've rented or proposing renting a smaller property in Wokingham and decanting some of the other services into underutilised space at London House and Wokingham Community Hospital.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other business? Okay, just before we close, any questions from our observers about the meeting? Ollie or Tom?
None from me, thanks, Martin.
Okay. In which case,
It was very lively and active. I can say it was good discussions, really good discussions and interesting material. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. That's kind of you. Today's next public board meeting is the 12th of September, and now we'll adopt our normal resolution to exclude the press and the public